Now, one of the most important things I feel being a creative professional is being able to diversify your offerings. I think if you're able to take on new skill sets, you're able to expand on the kind of work that you can offer to clients and prospective clients. One of my skill sets that I've incorporated over many years is photography, and I've been fortunate to be able to integrate my photography work with some of the creative direction and design work that I've done up until now. My area of photography is sports and active lifestyle. I think as a photographer, when you're coming up, it's good to learn many and multiple genres or niches of photography, whether it's automotive, food, fashion, portrait. And I think only through that way you will be able to find out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and also what you like and dislike in terms of creating a photography business. So I'm currently going through my existing portfolio of work, and I think it's time I did some updates of the images and the content. Now, before I do that, I think it's good for me and anybody doing updating their portfolio is to look back on their existing work and look at the things that didn't quite work or they didn't quite like, and how they can progress and make those images look better or create new images that are better in the future. So without further ado, let's jump into the iPad. I've selected a series of images and I'm going to talk you through the good things, some bad things, and things I probably will do differently going forward. Here are 9 images I've selected from my portfolio. I'm just going to walk you through really simply what I like, what I don't like, and what I think I would like to do differently going forward. This image is of a cyclist, and one of the things I'm always looking to do, especially when I'm shooting on location, is making sure that I have my subject separated from the background. And to do that, a lot of the time I will shoot with my subject backlit, as you can see here. And what's really good is because the sunlight is from behind, it carves out this light to shadow ratio and punches our subject out of the background a little bit more, giving this extra dimension and texture to the image. What I also like about this image is the movement here of her coming down these steps. You've got this sort of flowing line happening here, and her feet are just floating above the ground, which I really like, especially when I'm trying to show movement. Even if the movement is very slight, I really think helps and benefits overall. What's also interesting with this image, and I like a lot, is the flowing of the lines, the leading lines going forward. You know, drawing your eye into this direction here. Everything is sort of leading towards the movement that she's currently doing. What I think I would have liked to have done differently is maybe perhaps pushed her into the sort of taking a little bit more consideration about the rule of thirds, and maybe not have her so central, perhaps move her over to the right hand side a little bit more, so we get this sense of negative space and also sense of direction and flow. But overall, it's one of my favorite images, and I think it really works well. So when on location, it's often, especially when you're shooting solo, you don't have the luxury of photography lights. It's best to use the power of the sun, and I would always encourage you to think about what you're trying to achieve and how you can separate your subject from the background. Again, in this image here, as you can see, I've shot with the sun towards my subject's back, and this helps create that sense of depth and separates them from this really interesting and intricate background. The light was bouncing off, creating this warm glow, and it kind of led the direction of the image. What I love about it is also the smile of the subject, and capturing brand logo and identity is always important. Now, what I don't really like about this image is, or what I wish I'd done slightly differently, is taken a few more stills of perhaps his eyes as well, because I think one thing that's interesting is that his eyes are closed, and although it's capturing that moment, perhaps being able to see his eyes open and maybe some catch light in them would have been better to achieve. And also, the tight crop isn't the best, and going back again, I would probably shoot a little bit wider, see more of his arms, you know, see more of his eyes again. But overall, the image itself really works for me, and I love it brings a smile to my face every time I see this. One of the things I always look for is interesting backgrounds, interesting settings to put my subjects in. And especially when shooting things in the city, you get this sense of urban running. And I wanted to capture something along those lines, but again, feel a little bit more architectural in essence. And I think this captures that idea. What I love about this is the sense of space you get immediately. You see our subject very small, centered in the middle of the image, but you've got these, again, leading line, these lovely sweeping lines that go across the image, and they feel quite hypnotic. Our subject is mid-run, as you can see. And again, the sense, you know, the fact that her feet are off the ground gives you this sense of movement and floatiness and airiness. What I wish, going back, was possibly cropping in a little bit tighter for a composition. I think that would have been really, really interesting. And again, I believe that what it would have done would have created a more sort of hypnotic image, you know, with the lines going across. But I would have lost this sense of scale had I done that. I guess it's just down to a preference of crop, but I do like this. Let me know if you prefer a tighter crop, or you like the space that you see currently. In this particular image, you can see our subject framed centrally. It's a very powerful eyes to camera pose. You can see from the physicality, he's in good condition, physically strong. And I wanted to make sure I highlighted this in this particular shoot. Again, he's backlit to ensure that he is separated enough from the background. And that's one of the most important thing about this particular image, because his skin tone is very similar to the background. I wanted to make sure that I was able to punch him out enough without sort of exposing too much of the background. What I like about it, again, also is his pose. His eye contact is very, very powerful, very stoic. But one thing I wish I had done possibly more was found a way to add some sort of catch light in the eyes, so they don't feel as flat as they currently do. I think that would have helped to just bring a bit more life to the image. And also, once again, punched out a little bit more. I think there's this area here where I've cropped his elbow, and I'm not too keen about that. I think if I'd just come out a little bit more, I would have had the sort of the perfect visual. Also, as you can see, now looking back, you've got the distraction of the skipping rope here. In post, I probably should have removed that. I wasn't thinking of it at the time, but now looking back on it, I think that's definitely something that I would pay a little bit more attention to. One thing I love to look for when shooting dynamic photos is pace, change of direction, and explosiveness. And here I've captured this lovely flowing movement of this athlete as she's almost running off frame. You've got this really nice angle which changes the perspective a little bit, and it makes you want to follow through. And I also like that she's sitting on the left-hand side of the rule of thirds. I think this is really an interesting because it gives us this area of negative space that works really well. One thing I'm not too keen on, again, mostly in post, I would have gone and looked at is the highlights around her arm, her wrist here, and also here. Maybe removing them would cause a less of a distraction. And also, one thing I'm not too keen on is the fact that it's a soft focus image. My camera is a Sony a7R III, and I've had it for about 8 years now. So it's a bit long in the tooth, and it's not the best in tracking subjects anymore. And to often you do have to take and repeat and repeat and repeat before you're satisfied with the actual visual. In terms of branding, the good thing is we've captured the brand logo identity. And if this was a brand shoot, this would be definitely something that needs to be ticked off as part of the client ask. So if you're doing brand work, make sure the brand identity logo is clear and visible throughout. When I'm shooting more than one subject in a sports image, particularly running image, one of the tricks I like to pull out is the synchronized run, where I'll have one runner match the cadence of another. And what this creates is this sort of harmony of movement. Here you can see I'm shooting top down on these two athletes as they run left of the camera. This is natural lighting, so they're backlit, creating that sense of depth by punching them out of the background. In particularly the female runner, as you can see, we have this shaded area, which had she not been backlit, should probably fade a little bit into the background there. The other thing I like about this image is the play on the shadows. I think that's really quite nice. As you can see, their movement here and here. It creates a nice angle perspective to the image that I didn't initially see. Also, another thing about this image that doesn't really work with me is that the two subjects are wearing separate brand clothing. So you've got the white t-shirt from our female here, and you've got the dark long sleeve from our male runner here, and separate trainers together. These two things for me, from a testing perspective, are great and they work because it's purely a test. But if it was a brand campaign, or I was looking to reach out to brands, I would advise them to look at uniforming their clothes. And I think this would have further enhanced this flow of synchronization. So here we have a studio shoot, and I'm working with a yoga practitioner. And what I really like about this image is the contrast with the background, her skin tone, and also her outfit. And I think the combination of all three really allows the subject to punch out from the background. What is really lovely is the flow of movement. I'm always looking to capture fluidity, especially in sports images. I think it's a great way to showcase form and the artistry of the human body and the human form. So I wanted this image to feel really light and fresh. So I had a softbox camera left punching light towards our subject. what it does, it creates this sense of outdoor feel. It removed any specular light, so she's not backlit. There's no real sharp highlights on the subject anywhere, and it creates a nice, more natural, organic image. My only concern with this image is the fact that her leg's cropped. What can you do? Because I was very because I really concentrated on making sure that I had this shape that she was creating, focused on that. It really was a compromise between how much of her leg do you take off or don't. When I punched out a little bit further, there was a sense of disconnect from the image. So hence why the leg's cropped, but it is what it is. This is another studio shot where I was really experimenting with lighting. I have this top-down light on our subject here. And again, he's slightly backlit because the light, although it's above him, it's slightly behind him as well. And what that does, it creates this lovely contrast within light and dark, enhancing his physique. What I also like about this image is the movement of his body as he throws that right hook. I think it's really nice, and creating this triangular shape, but this curvature of his spine, and you can see how the light bounces off his back, showing the movement in a really dynamic way. Again, another thing I think really works well is how you can just about make out his eyes, almost disguising his next move. I don't have really any negatives to this really, but I suppose if I had to choose, would be perhaps again his eyes. You can't really make them out that well, even though the whole process, the whole flow and the whole movement that he's doing here is to disguise his next movement, protect himself. For me personally, I think that's absolutely fine, but overall an image that I'm happy with. This last image was a campaign shoot for Adidas, who were at the time sponsors of the London Marathon. And here you can see both our subjects wearing the same branding of clothing and doing the synchronized running movement that I talked about earlier. The scene is set, it's London, very clearly you've got the London Eye there, but unfortunately the day wasn't great. You know, you've got the grey clouds in the background, and there's a dullness to this image that I'm not too happy with. Now, ideally, you'd want to shoot this on a nice sunny London day where everything can really pop, but you don't always get those opportunities, and this is London. And another thing I would have done differently would have been to separate the runners a little bit more. As you can see, her foot just clips his knee here. And I think had I had them running at slightly further apart, it would have been a really, really clean shot. And one thing you should always look out for is making sure you have a perfect horizon, or try and get that as close to perfect as possible. Right, thanks for following along with me on this critique of some of my portfolio work. If you have any suggestions or critiques yourselves that you've spotted that I may have missed, please do leave them in the comment sections below. I'm always looking to improve, and hopefully you guys are too. If you'd like to see more, again, let me know, and I will definitely look at putting out more critique of some of my previous work. In the meantime, thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the next one.